with the Suffs Musical and that history of voting and Utah's pioneering role in the suffrage movement. So we're here at this monument. A Path Forward was dedicated in 2020 to honor both Utah's pioneering role in early suffrage as well as the work that remains to be done for access to voting rights. And I'll turn it over to Rebecca Clark, our historical director. She'll share a little bit of history about how Utah connects, and then we'll hear from Lieutenant Governor Henderson.
So I just want to set the scene a little bit. So on Valentine's Day in 1870, this building, Council Hall, was just bustling with activity. So there were stump speeches and live music from the 10th Ward Brass Band, and Salt Lake City welcomed voters to its municipal election. And this is just 2 days after the territorial legislature had passed a women's suffrage bill. So Seraph Young, a 23-year-old school teacher, was on her way to work, and she cast her ballot that morning. And she made history as the first woman in the nation to vote under an equal suffrage law.
Wow.
And about 25 women voted here in Utah that day. And they sparked more than 50 years of Utah women being actively engaged in the national suffrage movement. So Utah's suffrage history is rich and really complex. After winning their right to vote not once but twice before 1900, Utah women stayed really actively involved in that national movement, and they were deeply committed to securing a constitutional amendment. That meant a lot to them because they had had the experience of their right to vote being taken away because it was just through legislation. So they knew how important it was to have a constitutional amendment. And so they worked really closely with both NASA and Alice Paul's Congressional Union, and then the National Women's Party. The Congressional Union was the precursor to that. And she helped organize it here in Utah as they were working for that goal. So it's really perfect that we have with us here today the actors who portray both Alice Paul and Inez Lilhall in the musical Suffs. So both Alice and Inez visited Utah during their campaign to mobilize Western women's votes. And Alice Paul spent a week here in Salt Lake in August of 1915. She wrote to fellow leader afterwards about the overwhelming enthusiasm and interest that she found hearing for the suffrage cause. And 2 Utah women were even among that group of silent sentinel White House protesters who were jailed with Alice Paul in 1917. So 2 out of the about 40 women that were there. And then Inez came to Utah as part of her Whirlwind final speaking tour. And she spoke to a large group up in Ogden just 1 week exactly before she collapsed in Los Angeles. So she was here speaking. So we are just so honored and thrilled to have you here, and so grateful for how beautifully you have portrayed their story. Better Days unveiled this monument 2020 to celebrate the centennial of the 19th Amendment and Utah's unique place within the suffrage journey. I want to point a few of my favorite features of the memorial. So here we have the footstep of Seraph Young, that footstep that marked her historic first vote here in this building, Council Hall, in 1870. And then these door frames that expand more and more as you walk through the path. And I love how interactive it is. And these expanding door frames represent key pieces of federal legislation that expanded that right to vote to more and more women and people of color throughout the years that followed. The suffrage history commemorated in this monument reinserts Western women back into that national suffrage narrative that you so beautifully capture in the Suffs Musical. And it shows Utah women's long legacy of leadership and their active engagement in that national movement to obtain women's voting rights. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
I'm going to turn the time over to the Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson.
Well, first of all, aside from incredibly beautiful personal performances that you guys both gave yesterday, just incredible. I want you to know how meaningful it is to have Suffs here in Utah. Ever since I first heard Suffs, I've loved it, so inspired by it. About 2017 was when Utah really started looking at excavating and dusting off and shining a light on our women's history. we'd gotten buried, and a lot of really incredible women and men who worked for women's rights in Utah who kind of just got forgotten by. And so we started working on that, and I was in the state senate at the time. And when we passed legislation in 2018 to send a statue of the first woman in the United States, Martha Buchanan, who I'm wearing right, she was the first woman in the United States elected to a state senate. And she was elected here in Utah in 1896, the year we became a state. And we sent a statue of her, you see, to one of our two statues in the U.S. Capitol building. And it was a really hard building because we had to bring home a guy statue and replace it with her. And it was a challenge. But story of the Tennessee War of the Roses.
Oh, yes.
And Harry Byrne, and we used story to help show why it's important that we honor the people who went before us. Was the woman to be elected to a state senate in 1896, 24 years before the 19th that was passed. I was elected 116 years later. We have 29 state senators. I was the 27th to be elected in 116 years. Right? So I'm a Republican. Your vast majority of our legislature is Republican. When I was elected, there were 23 Republicans and 6 Democrats, and I doubled the number of Republican women in the Utah State Senate from 1 to 2. Right? When I left the Senate to become governor in 2021, there were more Republican men in the Senate named Dan than there were Republican women. There were 3 Dans and 2 women. And
That's crazy.
and I am the second lieutenant governor in the state of Utah. So while we've made a lot of progress, we made some early progress. We're still marching, right? Not done yet. And that's one of the things about Suffs is it's that recognition that you do your part. Okay, that you didn't solve all the problems.
Right.
It's okay that you didn't cure all the ills. Nobody's ever going, but you did your part. And it's up to the next person to do theirs. And that gives me a lot of hope and comfort. So thanks for being a part of that. Thank you for coming to our state, and thanks for being willing to come here, learn a little bit about the suffrage history in Utah that we are so proud of. We mentioned we won the vote not but twice. The reason that we had to do it twice is because Congress in 1887, 17 years after women in Utah had been voting, Congress passed, because they hated Mormons, passed a bill to strip Utah women of their right to vote. And that pivotal change there helped Susan B. Anthony solidify her resolve to get a national amendment, a federal amendment, instead of going state by state. Because if you can give it, then you can take it away too. And Utah women were illustrative of that. She was friends with Utah women. She visited twice. She came out here in 1871, the year Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the year after women got the vote, and then came again after we got back into, we became a state with women's suffrage and full equality enshrined in our state constitution. And then Utah women, our Better Days friends, they stopped with their own right vote. They went and made sure that the other women across the country could have that right too, and even went to jail for it. So anyway, we're proud of our history. We're proud of the fact that we can display some of that history. We've got beautiful, I don't know how much time you have, but if you want to go to the Capitol, it's incredible. And in the House chamber is this beautiful mural of Sarah Young casting that first vote here in this building.
We have to go.
I would love to show you. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.